And before this video begins, I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. Thank you for supporting the channel. All eras come to an end, whether that's a glorious, powerful empire, a football club's dominance, or most importantly, a period of Doctor Who. Yes, Series 10 is the swan song of showrunner Stephen Moffat and 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi, with the pair both seeking to leave at the end of the series. Of course, this didn't quite happen, but the climactic two-part finale, World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls, are indeed two very conclusive episodes, seeing the Doctor and his friends in a dramatic last stand against an onslaught of Cybermen, with threats on every side. This finale is often considered one of the best Moffat-era stories, and also one of the best Cybermen stories of all time. But does it deserve such a shining reputation? Is it a good farewell to Series 10? And should it have been the 12th Doctor's final farewell? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. So join me for the antepenultimate time as we take a deep dive into World Enough in Time, The Doctor Falls. One of the core storylines of Doctor Who Series 10 is Missy's redemption, seeing the Doctor's old frenemy saved from death and imprisoned within a vault as a way to encourage her to see the error of her ways and become good. In the episodes Lie of the Land, Empress of Mars and Eaters of Light, we start to see how she's starting to take accountability and seeking to learn and grow. So naturally, the start of this story sees her quite literally playing Doctor as the TARDIS lands on this giant, gorgeous ship and Missy steps out with her disposables.
Hello. I'm Doctor Who.
It's really fun to see this field trip setup, a way to test Missy's capability for good as the Doctor watches on from the TARDIS. You can tell Michelle Gomez is having so much fun as Missy swans about here, making all these snarky, fourth wall breaking remarks.
These are my disposables. Exposition and comic relief.
It's a great way of using Missy's character in a more protagonistic light, because you can tell she's genuinely trying her best, even if she hates how ridiculous this little test is. But Missy also shows a lot of her intelligence here as she works out things very quickly. How the ship is trying to escape from a black hole when something has happened to the crew. I appreciate how the Doctor suggests that Missy is actually off her game today, further showing how they're intellectual equals, something that has always been a core element of the pair's characterization. Although now it's clear that Missy struggles to perform her best because she's so distracted with trying to be like the Doctor, rather than herself. The reason this giant ship has sent out a distress call is because it's currently trying to escape a black hole, which looks absolutely incredible by the way. The black hole here isn't quite the same level of terrifying as the one in the Impossible Planet, but it still looks utterly fantastic and ravenous. This giant inescapable maw just looming over the ship. The visual effects team did an amazing job with it. We're also introduced to a fascinating mystery, because this blue guy is the only person on the entire ship, having changed the bridge to make himself the single pilot, terrified of the things in the lifts that take away humans, a very Moffat-y premise. I love the feeling of tension in the scene as things begin to spiral more and more, this perfect scenario descending into a tense standoff as George starts brandishing his gun.
Please stop this! Stop right there, now!
The tonal shift is executed perfectly. At first, it's all fun and jokes as Missy does her thing, but now the Doctor is forced to step in, knowing the danger George poses to Bill now that she's admitted to being human. It's great how he tries to use the tactics we're all familiar with, trying to ramble and distract George to give him enough time to slowly arc across the room and get in the way of the gun. He gives one of his speeches, something we've seen time and time again, always seemingly getting our protagonist out of trouble.
You don't know it yet, but in a short time, you will trust me with your life.
But what's so great about this instance is how it doesn't work. Because of our familiarity with Doctor Who, we're lulled into a false sense of security. We expect this speech to work because it always does. So we feel the same sense of complacency the characters themselves kind of feel at this point. But the Doctor doesn't even get to finish his speech before George panics, leading to one of the most shocking and unexpected moments in the whole Capaldi era. Yes, despite the Doctor doing his best to calm George and ease the tension, Mr. Blue Man hears the ding of the lift and impulsively shoots Bill. The whole tone of the scene shifting once again as we see that giant gaping hole in the companion, the second most important character in the whole show by the way. It's such a shock, this death happening within the first 10 minutes of an episode and out of such a normal scenario. It reminds me a lot of how Owen dies in Torchwood, so unexpected because there's no immediate threat. I appreciate the flashback to the events leading up to this scenario, a really well edited and slick sequence spanning multiple locations as the Doctor explains his relationship with Missy to Bill and Ardal, and obviously also the audience.
She's my friend, she's my oldest friend in the universe.
It's a great way to establish his own self-doubt, but it's really driven home with that scene on the rooftop. This part of the flashback serves two main purposes. The first purpose is that explanation of the deep, complex relationship between the Doctor and Missy, how old their friendship is, and how they used to dream of so much, only for Missy to become more obsessed with burning the stars. It's a beautifully acted and scored scene, but the second purpose is once again highlighting the Doctor's duty of care for his companion. He can't promise he won't get Bill killed, playfully telling her how fragile humans are and how easily they can die, which becomes all too clear when we cut back to the more serious scene on the spaceship as the Doctor fails to protect her.
Just promise you won't get me killed.
It's a really powerful dichotomy to make Bill's death all the more tragic. The Doctor's reckless nature once again getting his companion killed, a fixture of the Moffat era. I really love how the Doctor tries to hide his fury at George, needing Missy there to rein him in. We saw back in Face the Raven how angry the 12th Doctor gets at losing his loved ones, so this is more proof of that, his need to get back to Bill the only thing keeping him from spiralling.
Step away from that lift or I will kill you.
Don't, you will only make me angry.
Indeed, as Bill dies in the Doctor's arms, the lifts finally open, with the creepy patient slowly stumbling out and taking her body away. These patients look absolutely fantastic and add a brilliant sense of horror to the narrative. They're almost like zombies in a way, these quiet shuffling entities without a face, shambling around with their IV drips and able to sneak up on Bill easily because they're so unsettlingly quiet. Just by looking at them, you can tell there's something so deeply off about the patients, and it makes them fantastic initial antagonists, along with being such a big mystery throughout this whole first part. I especially love the scene as Bill explores the dark and creepy hospital, finding this big room full of the patients just sitting there silently, apart from one which is just constantly reacting to a bad week of Fantasy Premier League. This room looks so eerie, so big and empty, covered with darkness while the patients just sit there suffering and abandoned. The most chilling thing about the whole scene is the reveal that the nurse just muted the patient, rather than actually helping them. I love Bill's increasingly more frantic and scared reaction as she realizes they're all saying this, or variations thereupon, really driving home the horror of this dark hospital and making you wonder what they're doing to these patients. It's also quite dehumanizing too, these humans reduced to nameless, faceless and voiceless husks, living in endless pain and stuck in a living death they can never escape. The mute button also kind of serves as a critique to how society often just superficially addresses suffering, sometimes just managing and silencing symptoms rather than actually treating the underlying issues. What we see with the patients is a fate far worse than death, and it brings to mind philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre's argument that freedom and choice are essential to human existence. But the patients don't have this. They're stripped of their agency and their identities and rendered into mere objects of experimentation and control. An entire population under the surface, ignored and abused.
I do explain, they are the special patients.
Yes, despite the colony ship supposedly being empty, having been on course to pick up its colonists when it strayed too close to this black hole, there are thousands of life signs on the lower levels, creating a brilliant mystery because there's no signs of boarding and no way for anything to have gotten onto the ship. It's a great mystery, and I like how quickly the Doctor puts it all together, in his time zone of course. For Bill and us, it takes a little bit longer. It turns out the crew sent a team down to reverse the thrusters, only to become more and more affected by the time dilation of the black hole, leading to them and their descendants forming this incredibly grim and desperate dystopian city at the bottom of the ship. The visual direction of this city is fantastic, everyone just wearing rags and the smog giving it a grey and lifeless feel.
Our world is rust, our air is engine fumes.
All the walls are peeling and graffitied. It feels very brutalist and Soviet in a way. Everything and everyone just so impoverished and desperate, only able to hope to survive another day. I like how the city wasn't always like this, it has just degraded over the 1,000 years it has existed. The engine's poisoning it and making it more and more unsuitable for human life because the air is smog and rust. Floor 1056 is really an amazing setting for a Doctor Who story, something so new and fresh that really takes advantage of actual true science in a novel way, using time dilation to introduce this sprawling urban city created and destroyed in the span of just 2 days essentially. This time dilation concept is one of the biggest gimmicks of the episode, with the black hole manipulating time the further down the ship you get. For example, day 2 on the bridge is actually year 1000 on floor 1056. Time dilation is a famous phenomenon related to Einstein's theory of relativity, a pretty fresh direction to take Doctor Who in because it's a more unique style of time travel and playing around with time itself. And just as a side note, Interstellar had used it phenomenally just a couple of years earlier. Of course, time dilation had also previously been done in The Girl in the Fireplace, for example, but this story takes it in an even more grounded direction, with these real, believable physics giving a new perspective of the consequences of the passage of time. I absolutely love how they communicate this, with the cuts between the Doctor's explanation at the top of the ship and Bill down below watching it frame by frame over the course of 10 years. A fantastic way of driving the point home, whilst also adding a lot of tension and a strong feeling of isolation for the companion.
He's been raising that eyebrow for a week.
It's also a good sequence for showing us how much stuff is changing for Bill. Her clothing changes, Razor's room changes, and we even see how Bill has relationships with those around her, like the threatening and humorless nurse who makes Bill mop the floors, showing that Bill has been there for so long now that she's having an entire life down there and dreams of an escape. Stuck with this new heart keeping her trapped in the hospital, let alone the fact that the time dilation means she can never use the lifts to get back up top. She's stuck there with a faint hope of the Doctor, who left a message in her brain to wait for him, a constant reminder as she sees him, holding on to the hope because she has nothing else left, just a still image and Razor to keep her company.
Very fast bottom.
Yes, let's talk about the enigmatic Mr. Razor, a strange figure Bill meets in the hospital who becomes her friend and her window to the outside world. He's a bit of a quirky oddball, serving as a bit of comic relief with his way of speaking and his comments, like his explanation of how bad the tea is. Razor is charming in an endearing way. It's sweet to see how he takes Bill under his wing and forges this friendship with her, because, she's all alone.
You are dear to me. You are my dearest person.
He's a great vehicle for explanations about her situation and the wider issues with the city, explaining to both her and us just how dire things have become. But it's also through him that we get this idea of Operation Exodus, how the dying population will renew themselves and escape the floor, climbing through the ship to find a better life and take control. It's almost a religious dream of sorts, this constant faith that they can escape their doom if they take their evolution into their own hands. It's very much a perversion of real religious faith. I mean, the Bible literally has the Book of Exodus. The people of floor 1056 suffer constant pain, with this idea of an exodus being something to hold on to as a distraction, a way to cope and survive. It's all they have, the promise of something better. There's a tragic irony to the idea of Operation Exodus, this faith leading to their damnation, as, yeah, they're saved, sure, but they lose their humanity in the process, subverting the promise and hope in this horrific, twisted way. It's very similar to Utopia in that regard, a fabricated construct devoid of true hope and designed to manipulate, echoing how, throughout history, figures have used these kinds of religious promises to control populations by preying on their fears and their hopes, dooming them rather than saving them.
Soon, we will all be upgraded like them.
When it seems like the Doctor, Missy and Nardole are finally coming down to get Bill, she convinces Razor to take her to where the lift will end up. After all, he's her friend, they've formed this close bond, so he's easily persuaded and they break into the operating theatre. I really love how this sequence goes from a quirky stealth mission with Razor's silly disguise to a sudden and horrific betrayal as it turns out he was bringing Bill for her conversion.
Thank you for bringing her, Mr. Razor.
The twist is so perfectly executed and brings about a delicious sense of dread. After Bill's initial operation to save her, we never saw this surgeon again, and we only really saw his nurse assistant, so we almost forgot about them until this moment, making it all the more shocking and unexpected when they suddenly appear here. Looming sinister over Bill as she's grabbed by a patient, it's an instant injection of fear and mistrust in what had come to be a strangely familiar setting. Once again, it's a sense of complacence by us as a viewer and Bill as a character, because she forgets about how dangerous the hospital is and she became too blindly trusting of Razor, never really questioning what made her more special than all the other patients, and why she didn't end up like them, with this reveal showing that they were just waiting and she never could have been free.
I'm rebuilding you to survive in a world not made for flesh.
But the absolute best part about this betrayal scene is that reveal of the emotional inhibitor, which is the final jigsaw puzzle piece that makes everything fall into place. This whole episode we've been hearing about conversion and upgrades. We've heard the mechanical voice, seen the metal chest piece of Bill, and now the metal cap and handlebars. But it's only at this point that it really falls into place, especially when Missy finds the destination for the ship, Mondas, the original home of the Cybermen back when they were introduced in the 10th planet. Because, yes, this is a Cyberman story, and my god, it's one of the best. The reveal of the Cybermen really helps to recontextualize all the hospital scenes and the patients themselves, because now we know them as early stage Cybermen, making all the body horror even more dark and grim.
You don't want screaming in the main part of the hospital.
The very concept of the Cybermen as a Doctor Who species invites a lot of body horror because of their conversion into these cold, emotionless and unfeeling beings hellbent on turning the rest of the universe into them. However, we don't tend to see this body horror in action very often, because of the family-friendly nature of Doctor Who. We've had partial cyber conversions like Lytton in Attack of the Cybermen and Lisa in Cyberwoman, along with the show later having Ashad, but it's very rare for us to be shown the real, deeper implications of these conversions, and for us to be exposed to the true body horror of it all. However, World Enough and Time does a fantastic job at exploring it without being too explicit. The Cybermen are my favourite of the recurring Doctor Who villains, and I obviously have a bias towards the Cybus design because I grew up with them, but no Cyberman look will ever match that of the original Mondashian design, which truly emphasises the idea of humanoid entities being twisted into machines. Classic Who's men in rubber suits approach usually works against a lot of its monsters, but with the Mondashian Cybermen, it actually makes them even better because you can see the person underneath, or what's left of them. A constant reminder of the fact rather than them just being robots. There's just something infinitely more chilling about the cloth being pulled over their faces, and I think this story does a very good job of updating the classic design for the modern era, still remaining very faithful with just some minor changes here and there. I'm incredibly thankful for Capaldi pushing for their inclusion, even when Moffat was a lot more reluctant to feature them because he didn't think they'd be too effective. But even though the Mondashian Cybermen are a big reveal in this story, the even bigger, more unexpected one comes as Razor talks to Missy, hinting at a familiarity as she keeps brushing him off.
You don't remember being here before, do you?
However, right as she's about to warn the Doctor about the Mondas destination, Razor plays his hand, taunting Missy about her attempts to become good. I absolutely truly adore this encounter. It really confuses you and keeps you guessing. This whole episode we've seen Razor as just an eccentric part of the city and the hospital, a quirky friend looking after Bill. But now he has such a different tone, a much darker feeling about him, and the episode brilliantly builds to this crescendo as the music grows and grows, culminating in the truly epic reveal that, this whole time, Razor has actually been the Master himself. Disguised, much like he often did in Classic Who, hiding in plain sight before revealing himself. Hell, they even have a very Classic Who zoom in as he rips off his Mission Impossible mask, a great nod to how those old episodes were often shot. This reveal of the Sim Master, or Saxon Master, is the perfect cliffhanger for the story, and I love Capaldi's look of dread as the Doctor recognises his voice, this absolute disbelief and terror descending upon his face as he realises just how bad the situation has become and how helpless he now is. It's a perfect way to end a first part of a two-part story, although obviously it is a huge shame that they had already spoiled the return of the Master in both the trailer for Series 10 and the trailer for this specific episode. To this day, that will always be one of the worst decisions of Doctor Who marketing, because it takes away the truly transcendent feeling of watching this reveal, one that matches, or even surpasses, that of Utopia's own. I've always enjoyed the Sim Master in his appearances in the first Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who. I think he served as a strong parallel to the 10th Doctor's youth, and I didn't even mind all the Skeletor stuff all too much in The End of Time. But it's definitely true that Davies wrote his Master as a bit too bombastic and campily maniacal, so it's great to see Sim getting a more restrained, classic Master characterization here. Hell, he even gets the iconic classic Who goatee and a grey outfit. He absolutely oozes a classy, matured, yet still psychopathic Master that now matches the 12th Doctor instead of the 10th. Sim has a great time in these two episodes, you can tell how much he enjoys it.
Grandad's back.
It turns out that the Master left Gallifrey and got stuck on this ship because of the black hole. So he took over the burgeoning city and ruled it until they overthrew him and forced him into hiding as Razor. I don't think this incarnation is a very good ruler, honestly. Moffat had actually wanted to bring Sim back earlier, but didn't want him to overshadow Missy once he'd introduced her. So it makes sense for a good conclusive return and a nice contrasting team up. There is a pretty weird but somewhat entertaining subplot as the Master reluctantly tries to accept his inevitable future as a woman, like him putting on eyeliner. It's a nice bit of fun, but the subplot is kind of ruined because Moffat decided to write one-handed and have him constantly wanting to bonk Missy, because I guess we didn't have that enough with Clara and before her, Amy. Damn. I guess he has a favourite. Yes, the huge groundbreaking first this story pulls off is the TV show's first ever multi-master story. A mirror of the many multi-Doctor stories, like Day of the Doctor a few years beforehand. They even released a poster for this episode that basically looks the same as the Day of the Doctor poster, but with Missy and the Master instead of the 10th and 11th Doctors.
You've met the unit.
It's really great to see this villainous team up, which begins at the end of World Enough and Time and continues throughout the Doctor Falls, as the two villains have some excellent interactions, especially during the rooftop scene. It's a great way to kickstart the Doctor Falls, having these two Masters capturing him and taunting him about all the ways they could kill him. After all, you want to make sure it's something new that hasn't been done before, because a repeat would spoil the fun. It's brilliantly surreal as they dance to vintage music, emphasising the weirdness of seeing the villains team up. It really feels like they've won, and Missy's betrayal stings all the more, going all evil again, as if all those years in the vault never happened and the Doctor failed her. Even when she betrays her predecessor and claims to have been on the Doctor's side the whole time, it's obvious she just decided to switch sides when the Cybermen started attacking them, because she knows the Doctor can help. I do love how they communicate this, showing how conflicted Missy actually is. She doesn't even really know whose side she's on anymore. Indeed, the Doctor magically meddled with the Cyberman mainframe to allow them to convert Time Lords too, which they just kind of gloss over. It does give us a nice and thrilling escape though, as the Doctor is almost caught, only for Cyberbill to save him, and Nardole spirits the whole ragtag group away in a ship. I guess they really would have been screwed if there weren't any ships down there. I mean, why would there be on this level? Thanks to this convenient ship, the group is able to Kool-Aid Man their way back up the ship until they shatter the idyllic nature of the solar farm on floor 507. This setting is absolutely fantastic, a very picturesque countryside full of farms and greenery, really emphasising the sheer scale and technological advancement of this colony ship, with the big 507 on the ceiling the only giveaway of the true nature of this location. It very much fits that typical Moffat approach to two-parters, each part taking place in a completely different setting, allowing for a very distinct visual approach and contrast. It's great how it opens this story up so much to almost make the Doctor Falls a zombie apocalypse narrative. Indeed, this small farm is plagued by the zombie-like patients attacking at night, forcing the farmers to hold them off with their retro future laser rifles. I've mentioned it before, but this could be the premise of an entire Walking Dead type show. Seeing a group of survivors trying to survive on this sci-fi farm as they're constantly attacked. It's a brilliant idea, and I love the unsettling visual of the patients strung up and crucified. A fantastic contrast to the homely and cozy visuals of the countryside around them. There are some very dark hints that the children are being taken and converted, which is why they're all kept in the same place like this. The idea of children being converted has been played around with before, like in early drafts of Age of Steel, where the bride Cyberman was actually going to be a little boy, but that was deemed too dark for obvious reasons. But Moffat, on the other hand, well, he doesn't care, the darker the better.
Less to throw away.
It's explained that the Doctor and his friends have been recovering at this farm for 2 weeks, creating a nice sense of community because they have all these little side characters, and there's even the monster in the barn. I know it's a bit controversial these days, but I think the cruel decision to turn Bill into a Cyberman is a truly inspired one. Moffat deciding to really rip out your heart with the reveal as the Doctor finds her in the conversion theatre with those tragic words.
I waited.
I absolutely adore the detail that he was up there for 10 years and only missed Bill by just 2 hours. Really showing the level of tragedy, because he would obviously blame himself for not rushing down there sooner. This idea of waiting for the Doctor is very prominent within Moffat's work on Doctor Who. The Girl in the Fireplace, Amy Pond, and the episode The Girl Who Waited all play upon similar themes, which is why it's so interesting to see him return to the well here. But it's really effective in the story, once again playing with that idea of his duty of care. I do think another interesting idea the story plays with is Bill being trapped inside the Cyberman body. I feel like you can easily read it as being almost a metaphor of sorts for the LGBTQ experience. How trans people can feel trapped inside a body they don't want to be in, or how a lot of non-heterosexual people feel like they can't be themselves.
I don't want to live if I can't be me anymore.
Obviously, I'm not exactly the best person to talk about these kinds of themes and how effective they are, but I definitely think you can read the Cyber Bill plot in this way, especially with the less subtle part of Bill escaping the Cyberman body and immediately kissing a girl, which only makes that subtext much more obvious, intentional or not. I really love how this episode visually represents Bill's nature in this story, shooting her as human for the most part, inspired by how Quantum Leap shows main character Sam Beckett even when he's in the body of someone completely different. Obviously, these are both for the exact same reasons. I mean, Pearl Mackie is the co-lead, so you can't just remove her for the entire second part. But even on a narrative level, it works so well for showing that difference between humanity and Cybermen, with the emotions of Bill completely absent when we do see her in her cyber form. This choice is just so incredibly effective, especially the first instance where Bill looks in the mirror and sees her new, real face staring blankly back at her. It's such a fantastic moment of pure and utter dread, further helping us to understand what everyone else is seeing and why they're so scared. Because visually, there's nothing left of Bill anymore, just this intimidating, soulless machine. There are so many of these smooth transitions between her two forms, and it looks superb. Bill's mind has rebelled against the programming, so she still sees herself as human, so we do too. It's a coping mechanism that really adds to the body horror of the Cybermen in this story, this denial of reality because the truth is too painful to bear, just like Oswin in Asylum of the Daleks, who created an entire fake world in her head because she couldn't process the truth of her being turned into a Dalek. Again, that story really should have been a Cyberman one, it just works so much better. It really is so tragic to see Bill struggling with this realization of her life being over. She's trapped like this forever and nobody will ever be able to look at her or love her again. Her identity is completely gone, and Pearl Mackie does amazing with this rich material. It really breaks your heart.
People are always going to be afraid of me, aren't they?
Considering Hazran gets spooked by Bill and tries to kill her when they're on high alert, they probably should have given Cyber Bill a badge or a scarf, or just something to make sure they knew which one she was. There's a great scene of the Doctor trying really hard to find a way to explain to Bill what she's become. You can really see his nerves and how uncomfortable he's feeling at having to break this news to his companion and his best friend, whilst also himself having to come to terms with her fate. Again, he obviously blames himself for not being able to save her sooner or protect her to begin with, because now he's face to face with the long-term consequences of it. The Doctor is also just clearly straight up scared of her, even if he tries his best not to show it. When Bill starts getting too emotional or gets too close to him, he instinctively backs away from her because, he's been fighting Cybermen all his life and knows how dangerous they are. I mean, just look at how much damage Bill does when she gets too emotional and blasts a hole in the wall. I also think a bit of his fear is because her resistance won't last forever, and eventually the Cybermen will take control of her mind and completely change her into another cold, faceless machine.
It's like I'm hanging on in a hurricane, and I can't hang on forever.
There's an amazing scene as Bill asks if the Doctor can fix her like he swore to, but now he's forced to admit that there's no way back. She's been irreparably changed like this, and you can't un-Cyberman someone, because their body parts get all mangled and blended together. Well, unless you're James Corden, I guess. Of course, the Doctor still has some hope, referencing his third regeneration, because Bill is still able to cry, and it's not engine oil like we saw with Yvonne, for example. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Speaking of the Cybermen, this story gives us an extra treat with multiple types of Cybermen, thanks to the parallel evolution the Doctor explains. Because the Cybermen will always be inevitable with a need to constantly innovate and advance technology. So you get the Mondasian design as the basic, earliest kind, with the Cybermen developing further and further the longer they exist.
The Cyberman. There's no such thing as long enough.
Indeed, as Missy impulsively calls the lift they need to escape, a Moffat-era Cyberman appears, because that time dilation plot hook has given them a huge tactical advantage. Since the protagonists are about halfway up the ship, the Cybermen now have decades or even centuries to churn out more advanced versions as they prepare for the attack, leading to that excellent mix of Mondasian, Cybus and Moffat-era Cybermen in a wonderful multi-generational team-up. Again, it's very much like Asylum of the Daleks, where you get all those different types of Daleks in one place. Obviously, as a Cyberman nerd, it's a big shame that we didn't get cameos of Telosian or Cyber Neomorph designs to really tie it all together and show their history more, although I understand it probably would have affected their level of menace. However, I seriously love how it takes the opportunity to show this evolution of the Cybermen, how much they've been able to refine themselves in what seems like no time at all for our main characters.
Since we left, they built a weapons-grade version to come after us.
It really introduces a chilling sense of inevitability, because they have the advantage of time, and can afford to churn out better technology like this, with no way for their targets to escape them, at least not for long.
By the time we get to the bridge, they'll have had thousands of years to work out how to stop us.
And the Cybermen have more than enough patience to get to the top of the ship, where George is probably now just a pile of dust by this point. Guess the story just kind of forgot about him up there. And now that the Cybermen are getting ever closer to floor 507, the farmers are forced to prepare for battle, with even Nardole becoming a commander of sorts, marshalling the defences and getting them ready for war. But of course, in true Doctor Who fashion, the plan isn't to actually shoot at the Cybermen, because the main characters all know that would be hopeless. After all, the patients are easy because they're still just mostly normal fleshy bodies, but the more advanced the Cybermen are, the harder they are to kill, obviously. Instead, there's a pretty clever plan to blow up the fuel pipes below the farm, making the villains think that the survivors are more powerful than they actually are.
They're robots, but they've got monkey brains.
It's a clever use of theatrics to buy enough time to get the children to safety, because the Cybermen temporarily pause their advance to change to battle mode, instead of tracking the children to convert. I think it's a really novel way to get around the sheer one-sidedness, and it also gives us a great atmosphere in this prelude to war. The Doctor standing guard like a sheriff in his rocking chair. It's a great melancholic feeling because you know that there's no way out. It feels a lot like Parting of the Ways in that regard, an ominous feeling as the villains begin their assault in a base under siege format, with three protagonists knowing they're doomed.
This is it. Afraid.
I love the moment as the Doctor sends Nardole away to help escort and protect the children once they escape. It's a great moment between the two, an argument that culminates in Nardole finally realising just how much the Doctor actually respects and appreciates him for everything he's done. Ever since Beryllium, Nardole has cared for the Doctor, and it always seemed like a thankless job until this moment right here, where they have a silent, mutual understanding that this is the last time they will see each other. I find it such an emotional moment, this breaking of the Fellowship as they allow Nardole to escape and live, even if it's not for long. Again, it reinforces just how hopeless this situation is. Like that Series 1 finale, where our main characters are forced to say goodbye and give up almost. It's also tragic when Bill accepts her inevitable death too. A touching final moment with the Doctor as they're unsure what to even say to one another. It's a sweet farewell, even if it does have that weird line about Bill just reminding the Doctor she's into girls and people her own age. That line always feels so out of place and disrupts the sentimentality of the moment, although it is kind of funny to imagine this being said by a Cyberman. Shifting gears a bit, one of the main plots in The Doctor Falls is seeing more and more of Missy's internal conflict, especially when she still refers to Bill as her, compared to the Master who calls Cyber Bill it, and constantly compares her to mechanical objects like fridges. Come to think of it, the Saxon Master would love 4chan.
Well, doesn't that take all the fun out of cruelty? Might as well rile a fridge.
It's interesting how throughout the second part the Master is like the devil on Missy's shoulder, reminding her of her old black-hearted ways and tempting her to fall back into them. It's almost as if she's torn between him, her villainous past, and the Doctor, her possibly heroic future. There's even a bootstrap paradox ensuring she and the Master could return to the Master's TARDIS and get it working again, abandoning everyone else to die. And this perfectly paves the way for the culmination of this dual Master setup, as the Doctor tries to convince the fleeing duo to stand with him, even if there's no hope.
Why not? Just at the end. Just be kind.
This scene is just quintessentially Doctor Who, especially for the Moffat era, and it sums up the character of the Doctor so well. Capaldi really knocks it out of the park with this whole speech, basically laying out the Doctor's mantra of just being kind and trying to do his best no matter what. Unlike most episodes, this finale was actually the last episode of Series 10 to be shot, so I think it gave Capaldi extra motivation to really make it the best it could be, since it would be one of the last times he could be the Doctor. It just gives the speech that extra gravitas and sense of bittersweetness, because it's the 12th Doctor accepting his death, but knowing what he's dying for is good and honest. After all, it's exactly like the definitive phrase of Series 10, without hope, without witness, without reward. This is such a great payoff for that, showing he's willing to go this far and proving he means it. It also reminds me a lot of the iconic saying, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And here the Doctor is, falling for something, because he's honest and true to his beliefs and his values.
Where I stand, it's where I fall.
It's definitely tragic and heartbreaking as the Doctor turns to Missy, hoping she'll finally stand with him as an ally and help him in these last moments. It's a chance for her to show how much she's changed and how far she's come. A moment where she can show she's capable of being truly good like she'd promised she would try to be.
Stand with me. It's all I've ever wanted.
The Doctor tried so hard and really seemed to be getting through to her when she was in the vault. She was realising her wrongs and taking accountability, so this is the final test. After all, like Missy said in Death in Heaven, she just wants her friend back. So the Doctor is giving her that choice, but on his terms. And sadly, she turns him down, unable to break free from who she was, once again choosing to run and condemn others instead of embracing the growing sense of morality.
But no. Sorry. Just...
I honestly believe that if her previous, definitively evil self hadn't been present for this story, Missy probably would have stayed. I know she physically wouldn't be able to leave without him, but her fall back into villainy only happened because of the Master. She was willingly engaging in the process before this point, showing how far she has come. And this development is proven when she does change her mind at the very last second, killing her predecessor with an Assassin's Creed hidden blade, choosing to quite literally kill the concept of the Master to stand with the Doctor. I think it's a great payoff to that ongoing storyline, showing how the Master can change. They do have the capability to be good, or at least good enough.
It's time to stand with the Doctor.
It's cool how Day of the Doctor culminates in the idea that the Doctor has always been heading towards this grand moment of saving Gallifrey, and we get something similar here as Missy realises she's always been heading towards standing with the Doctor. It's the single culmination of the character's journey through all their incarnations. This reconciliation with their childhood friend. Sure, the Doctor and the Master have reluctantly stood together before, when there's no choice otherwise, or the Master has some secret scheme, but this is the first time where the character can freely choose to stand and die with the Doctor. In a way, it's Missy's moment of no more, finally accepting that she doesn't have to be evil. She can redeem herself and be good after all, because she knows the Doctor is right.
It's where we've always been going, and it's happening now, today.
However, the most tragic part is that the Master kills Missy right before the lift closes, denying her this chance at redemption. So the Doctor never finds out about her change of mind. It's sad when you realise he never gets that solace and dies feeling like he's failed Missy. Hell, even to this day, he doesn't know that she tried to help him after all. I think it says so much about the earlier incarnations of the Master that he would be so willing to quite literally kill himself, all to avoid conceding and standing with the Doctor. This is why the Sim Master is particularly the perfect choice for this narrative, because his incarnation specifically was obsessed with winning and beating the Doctor.
I win.
He even allowed himself to die just to spite the 10th Doctor, so it's fitting that he is the architect of Missy's downfall too. After all, who better to kill the Master than the Master?
This is our perfect ending. We shoot ourselves in the back.
I love the shot of Missy's body in the forest, very reminiscent of Clara's death in Face the Raven. It looks incredible and punctuates how good of an ending this is for the Master as an entire character. She's had her redemption arc, the Master story is now complete, and it ends in such a satisfying way. It reminds me a lot of how the character was originally supposed to die in the unmade story The Final Game, where the Master would have given his life to save the Doctor, making a conscious, selfless final decision to do a good thing for his former best friend. I know the Master got brought back by Chibnall and Big Finish made some convoluted explanation as to how Missy survived this fatal blast, but I really think they should have left this as the character's ultimate fate, because it's so conclusive and fitting. A tragic end as Missy is denied that chance to actually be good for a change. As Missy lays dying, the Doctor is busy mounting his own last stand in a great scene as he runs through the forest, destroying Cybermen to the Shepherd's Boy in a monumental defiance against the odds. His reminders of all the time he's overcome their previous invasions and attacks almost gives you a sense that he can still make it out of this one. But the reality is that this mission is basically like the end of Halo Reach. You can run and fight for hours if need be, especially if you're chasing an achievement that doesn't actually exist, or because your friend at school told you he definitely got it. Thanks, Kester. But in the end, you'll always run out of time and succumb to the odds, which we see as the Cybermen finally surround and kill the Doctor, taking 3 whole blasts to kill an already dying 12th Doctor. I know Capaldi does overact a little bit as the Doctor goes down here, but honestly, he deserves it by this point, because of how much he did for the character. Again, this really drives home how hopeless this whole endeavour was, because the children can only make it a few floors up, and without the Doctor, they'll be dead very soon. After all, if the Cybermen can kill the Doctor so quickly, how can a group of unarmed children stand any more of a chance? It's very much like Parting of the Ways, again, where nobody makes it out, it's a bloodbath. Although at least this one is an off-screen massacre.
So it'll take them a while to regroup before they find us again.
I find it really heartbreaking as the Doctor actually rejects his regeneration, telling himself to let go and sacrificing himself in one big final explosion to take as many Cybermen down with him as possible. It's a very heroic sacrifice, and it gives us such a beautiful moment as he lays there, wishing there could have been stars, paired with some truly fantastic music that unfortunately will never be released. I adore the visual of the Doctor laying there, much like Missy earlier, except this time he's laying alone in a wasteland as the flames still burn around him.
I hope there be stars.
It's a pretty fitting and emotional way to kill off the Doctor, dying in battle, but not out of conquest or power. Instead, he has done it to save children and to be kind, which is how any incarnation would want to die, especially in the modern era. Again, because it's kind, it's the right thing to do. Nobody will ever know what the Doctor has done here, but that's not why he did it. Like I said, it's a very fitting death for the character, and the heartbreak is driven even further home as Bill cries over his dead body, having lost everything, her identity and even her best friend. However, I'm not so fond of what follows. I find it cool that Heather makes a reappearance after promising she wouldn't go, feeling like a nice bookend for Bill's story, because the whole idea of her leaving her tears for Bill was introduced right at the start, so it's a nice way to come full circle. What I don't like though is how conveniently Heather manages to un-Cyberman Bill and turn her into an immortal puddle entity like herself. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't such a typical Moffat cop-out companion ending, where the character dies but with a huge asterisk that kind of invalidates the death. I mean, Heather even says she can make Bill human again if she wants, which kind of ruins the whole tragedy of her ending.
I can make you human again. It's all just atoms.
It's basically how everyone sees Clara's ending, except at least with her, she was actually forced to eventually go back to her original death. Unlike Bill, who is now basically just a godlike immortal being.
You're like me now. It's just a different kind of living.
Yes, these magical puddle abilities also allow the plot to get the Doctor back inside the TARDIS, which was completely inaccessible due to the time dilation. After all, it would be a huge plot hole to just forget the TARDIS is up there, and it takes an eternity to get the lift, so it's a smart, albeit convenient way to circumvent that.
There is no safe way to get back to the TARDIS.
I won't lie though, I do find it pretty funny how this whole ending is basically the same as Moffat's comedy sketch Curse of Fatal Death from all the way back in 1999, where the Doctor died but magically came back because even the universe can't face the idea of him being dead, and he even turns into a woman afterwards. I just find it funny how Moffat basically parodied one of his own endings nearly 20 years before it actually happened.
Because one day, everyone's just gonna need you too much.
Jokes aside though, I do appreciate the throwback as we see the montage of all the companions calling for the Doctor before his death, a very obvious reference to Logopolis back in Classic Who. It's a really nice way of bringing everything full circle by showing the full scale of the 12-year journey to this moment. All those companions who came and went, really making it feel like a fitting true end for the show, or at least the modern era. Although it's kind of rude that they included Jenny and Vastra in this montage, but not Rory or Mickey, who actually travelled with him as proper companions. And the worst part is them leaving out the best companion of them all, Pete. Truly disrespectful. He was like the most important one. All jokes aside though, it's interesting to view this final scene as the regeneration it was originally intended to be, before Twice Upon a Time was cobbled together. You have all the elements there, with Bill departing, the Doctor dying, and then a rousing moment of post-regeneration madness, as he quotes his old incarnations before getting his bearings again. I genuinely feel like the original script would have had the 12th Doctor regenerating after this montage, similar to the 5th Doctor, and it would have worked really well in my opinion. And also, just from a pedantic nerd standpoint, it would have been great to finally have a Classic Who style laying down regeneration, which no modern Doctor has ever had for some weird reason. However, incoming showrunner Chris Chibnall didn't want to start his new era with a Christmas special, and Moffat didn't want the show to lose its prestigious Christmas Day slot, so the 12th Doctor denies his regeneration here, shutting down the transformation like rapidly spamming the B button during a Pokemon evolution, something we've never really seen the character do before. I know a lot of people unfortunately hate Twice Upon a Time, but I simply adore the idea of the 12th Doctor being just too tired to keep burning up his old body for a new one, continuing an endless cycle of losing everything over and over again.
Let it go.
The 12th Doctor had made his peace that he would die in that field, surrounded by dead Cybermen, So for him to wake up in the TARDIS just fine almost makes him feel like he's wrong to still be alive. He doesn't deserve to be whilst others die, especially his own two best friends. It also goes back to what Bill said earlier about not wanting to live if she can't be herself. The 12th Doctor has a similar fear of regeneration at this point to the 10th Doctor, not wanting someone else to walk away as him, which is a fantastic premise for the special.
I don't want to change again.
He doesn't want to keep cheating death forever when he's lost everything yet again. He just wants a normal death. And then we get the fantastic cliffhanger of the first Doctor showing up in the snow, making this not just a multi-master story, but also technically a multi-Doctor story at the same time, even if only for like a minute as a cliffhanger. It's an excellent ending nonetheless, especially considering how relatively short notice it had to be added into the plans, because this was originally meant to be the complete end of the line for both Capaldi and Moffat, but that's a story for later. World Enough and Time and The Doctor Falls are incredible episodes and one of the best two-parters in all of Doctor Who, and it's definitely the best Cyberman story with its great body horror, chilling twists, and a brilliant setting thanks to the time dilation managing to bring the absolute best out of the monsters. It's a perfectly crafted finale with everything you could ever ask for, culminating in that amazing death for the Doctor as he goes out in a hopeless attempt at saving just a few lives for just a little longer. The music is excellent throughout the story, and Rachel Talalay returns to show her brilliant direction once again. There's a great contrast between the oppressive, claustrophobic first part and the expansive battlefield setting of the second. It's a sublime story for all the main actors, with Mackie the focus of World Enough and Time and Capaldi the focus of The Doctor Falls. I also love the two-master approach, giving John Sim more to work with when it comes to his master, and I love how Missy's story arc wraps up. It's just such a fantastic two-parter I can't gush enough about. Obviously, it gets a nice big S rank on the tier list. It does definitely have flaws, like the ending with Bill surviving and some other minor issues here and there, but it's all more than made up for with the return of the Mondashian Cybermen, the multi-master narrative, the Doctor's final stand, and the unique time dilation narrative. If this story was the end of Doctor Who as a whole, I would be happy. It wraps up so much and ends on a really powerful character examination of the Doctor. Oh wait, no, sorry, I thought I was already talking about Twice Upon a Time there. It is interesting how this was supposed to be the outright end of the 12th Doctor's run and the Moffat era. You can definitely see a lot of that in the fabric of the writing and the story beats, and I think it works perfectly as a series finale. If it was a normal show, this would be the end, and it would feel incredibly satisfying and bittersweet. But Doctor Who isn't a normal show, and we're not quite done here just yet. We still get the 12th Doctor for one more precious hour. So, let me know what you think of the Series 10 finale. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one for the penultimate time. Bye bye. And I'd just like to give a special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Platinum level patron Matthew Burns, and my Gold level patrons Chris Douglas and Daniel Shillito. Thank you so much for your support.